Hello. I've never done this before. Can you hear me? um, I've never done a live stream before. Looks like there are a few people here. What do you want to talk about? Hmm. This is an experiment of sorts. I don't know if it'll work, but if people have questions, I can start talking. But otherwise, I'm not sure what to say. I just finished doing an interview with Nick Estes about this book and spent 2 hours doing that today, and I highly recommend it. All right. Please ask questions if you have any. Oh, all right. Did I did I read the N+1 piece on podcast? Yes. And those are their unsigned editorials, so I'm not sure who wrote that one. I thought it was excellent. Um, I've thought a lot about how podcasts, the way that they fit into the culture of this particular moment in capitalism, and it does seem to me that they are related to like a neoliberal conditioning. Like that's why they work. We're trying to fill every little moment of our lives and maximize its utility. And I mean, the N+1 piece was a polemic, and so it didn't require, I guess, the entirety of nuance around the subject, which would be, maybe some podcasts like my podcasts are slightly are different than say Joe Rogan's, but overall, I definitely agree with the critique. But if you're going to be a neoliberal subject walking around with earbuds in all the time, then I think that the dig is a good contribution to that. um, other thoughts, other questions? This is bizarre, just being in a room speaking by myself, responding to text messages, but it's interesting. Yeah, but I highly recommend reading the new N+1 and their opening piece on podcasts, which opens with a joke about the dig and learning about the 18th Brumaire while you assemble IKEA furniture. Other thoughts, other things. Maybe the next time I do this, I'll have someone in to have a conversation with, and that will give me more to do while I'm waiting for comments from y'all. Eric, yeah, no problem. I am happy to talk about the N+1 piece in podcasts. Don't worry, you're not dominating the conversation. I know some people said they had questions about how the podcast works, how Jacobin works, things of that sort. Feel free to ask those if you'd like. Yeah, so you write that you're like 75 minutes into a podcast on the Vienna School. To what degree you're really like, it's really about learning, and to what degree it's, oh, thank you. To what degree what's interesting about a podcast, like like mine or any like of the purportedly intellectual podcasts, is just sort of the idea of like proximity to intellectualness, or like the kind of like image of intellectuality. I mean, I think that is a pervasive part of the political culture right now. If you look at like Pete Buttigieg, he's definitely appeals to a certain liberal sensibility that that figures smart people in a very particular sort of ways, and that diagnoses our current political problems as being rooted in the lack of enough smartness in the White House, which is sort of a recapitulation of a lot of the liberal opposition to the Bush administration. The whole idea that the problem with George W. Bush was that he was a Texan hick who wasn't smart enough to do his job, which then, of course, lays the groundwork for Obama. But anyways, so I do think that's a big thing in liberal culture. I imagine when you're listening to Quinn Slobodian's interview that you're not just impressed by the trappings of intellectualism, but are actually learning something. That was an interesting interview in the sense that Quinn is obviously a respected scholar, but not a really famous person. But his arguments were so interesting, and the history he was telling was so interesting that it ended up being one of the most listened to episodes of the podcast ever, which I'm glad it was. Other thoughts from Eric or anyone else in the room? If you don't ask questions, I don't know what to talk about. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Does anyone else in the room have any questions, or else I might wrap this up and try it again another time with a guest so that we can talk to each other and take questions, because I don't know what to talk about if you don't ask questions. All right, I'll leave like 30 more seconds for anyone, a minute to anyone to ask anything. Oh, thanks, Eric. Yeah. I really liked the interview with Jade McAlevey as well. Not only is she obviously a expert on labor organizing, but one of the best people conveying how labor organizing works to a broader public outside of the labor movement. And not only that, I think a lot of people who listen to that, and I also found it very much full of lessons for organizing in general beyond labor. And yeah, Tithi Bhattacharya is great. I highly recommend reading Feminism for the 99%. I actually, the only author of that book that I haven't interviewed, because I interviewed Nancy Fraser and I interviewed Tithi. I haven't interviewed Cincia Oruzza yet, but I did see her speak in Chile recently, and she was incredibly impressive. So I'm planning on having her on. She talks a lot about the history of feminism and Marxism. She has some books on that I'm planning on checking out. Man, podcasts that make you feel hopeful that Bernie can win. I mean, I'm cautiously hopeful. I'm also very worried about Joe Biden because, I mean, he's polling just really solidly ahead, but Bernie seems very stably in second place. So it seems as though the primary has the possibility of coalescing around this dynamic of Biden as the establishment candidate and Bernie as the challenger. I mean, what complicates that is that there's so many other fucking candidates that Bernie, they're going to be blurring that like sharp Bernie Biden dichotomy that I think might be helpful. But Bernie has such solid support. I think that sort of dynamic can emerge anyways. The bad news about the dynamic is that that's the same dynamic of 2016, which obviously didn't work quite well enough. But Bernie's base amongst young people seems incredibly strong. The big problem seems that old people like Biden. So one way I look at that is that Bernie's, I think there's a hard floor. I think there's a hard floor under Bernie's support amongst young people. I don't think a lot of young people are going to peel away from Bernie. I think the floor of support of older people under Biden is softer, and I think it's more likely that some portion of the older vote can be siphoned away by either Bernie or other challengers to Bernie's advantage. But we'll see. I mean, Bernie's raising an extraordinary amount of money. I went to a kickoff party for him just to see what the organizing on the ground looked like. I think that was like 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. And I don't think any other candidate has the sort of basic grassroots organization that's so pervasive across the country. So if that can be translated into real power on the campaign trail, I mean, I think that's possible. And I think that's what it'll take for him to win. But yeah, I'm excited and terrified at the same time, personally. Other thoughts? Thank you very much. Well, Eric, I appreciate you listening, and thank you. Other questions or comments? Comments are fine too. Thank you. I'm in Providence right now, but I'm going back to Chile on June 3rd. Yeah, Vinny, good question. I don't think I'm doing like a systematic series in that way again, but I'm definitely thinking about it. Currently, I have Rashida Tlaib scheduled for, I think, 2 weeks from now. I'm working on getting Ilhan Omar on, and I hope to have AOC and Bernie back on again. I'm also, yeah, but who else I'm open to suggestions. I was thinking about Rokana and maybe some more local level elected officials too. Like last year, I did the three state reps, the 3 DSA state reps from Pennsylvania. So I'd be interested in more local ideas too. On the ground interviews at the DSA convention. I haven't decided whether I'm going yet. I am going to be at the Socialism 2019 conference in Chicago, which is July 4th through 7th, if I remember correctly. But I think I will try to do interviews in Chicago at the Socialism conference. And I have thought about doing interviews at the DSA convention. I think that'd be interesting. And I am thinking about, I am having Doug Henwood on soon too. I think Friday. I have my interview for him scheduled. I'm not sure when it'll air, but he just published a really interesting article on DSA in the New Republic, which might also be part of sort of previewing or analyzing the state of DSA ahead of the convention. Like I had that debate between Praxis and Momentum Caucus or SLAPE members before the last DSA convention. I don't know that I want to do a debate again, but things that kind of can inform people about what DSA is up to in advance would be, I'm definitely interested in doing. Other questions or thoughts? Vinny, are there particular people you would like me to have on in terms of midterm 2020 stuff? I did do Brianna Joy Gray, Dave Weigel, and Walid Shahid. I don't know that I could to talk about 2020 like a month and a half ago. I don't think I'd get Brianna on again in that capacity now since she's Bernie's press secretary. But I'm also planning on maybe having some more like lefty journalist roundtables. Nice. Um, okay. Well, ask me anything else you'd like, because then I'm going to check out, because uh, this was a noble experiment, but I don't know that it's quite right for the dig listenership, given the low attendance. But I might try it again with a guest, and maybe that would work better. Any last questions? All right. Well, if you don't have anything else, I'm going to head out. But thank you for trying out this this experiment. All right. Oh, there you are. Okay. Um, huh. Thoughts on a viable mass audience leftist tabloid? I've thought a lot about this, because when I was a local journalist in Philly, well before I became a podcaster for a living, and I worked for the city paper, but I was a huge fan. Philadelphia had, and to some extent still has, two papers: the Philadelphia Inquirer, which is like the mainstream, straight-laced broadsheet, and then the Philadelphia Daily News, which is the working class tabloid that has always prided itself on like a real strong connection to the working class inhabitants of Philadelphia's row house communities. And the Daily News actually had a very not a leftist tilt, but a liberal left tilt. And so when I was covering the Republican Governor Tom Corbett's just brutal cuts to public education, which really like defined Philadelphia politics in the area. Like, basically, as an aside, like Governor Corbett cut $1 billion from public education statewide. Neoliberal privatizers took advantage of that to just sort of like use the crisis to implement their privatizing reforms on the cities through charterization, et cetera. And the Daily News ran many amazing covers. And that's like the genius of a tabloid is the cover, just like skewering Governor Corbett. I forget which year this was, but Governor Corbett, after his cuts, after he became deeply unpopular and just like a total pariah in Philadelphia, was supposed to visit Central High School. It was his first visit ever, I think, to a Philadelphia public school. And students and teachers protesting basically chased him away. And the Daily News's cover the next day was Corbett gives students the central finger, and like a play on Central High School. And it was like a beautiful left populist tabloid cover. And it did, I think it was in tune with a lot of the politics of working class Philadelphia. So I think there is a readership, hypothetically, for a left-wing tabloid. The Daily News historically has occasionally taken more liberal left positions and used that sort of kind of tabloid cover humor for left populist ends. But I think the problem with a left tabloid is actually, at the end of the day, is the same problem that all newspapers have, which is the rise of the internet has destroyed their business model. So that's, I mean, whether a left tabloid could succeed is related to the question of, I guess, whether any print news publication can succeed. Other questions? These are great questions, by the way. And yeah, Corbett was a horrible, horrible guy. But his governorship did inspire an incredible explosion in grassroots organizing in Philadelphia, and sort of a rebirth of the city's left that I think in many ways ultimately helped lay the groundwork for for the movement that elected Larry Krasner district attorney. That's sort of like a prehistory to the movement that I don't think's really been written about either in Philadelphia or nationally. But the whole, not just Occupy Philly, which was a big thing, but this entire constellation of anti-austerity movements that emerged alongside and to counter the Tea Party at that moment. That was critical in Pennsylvania. I am planning on putting the podcast on YouTube because I have found out from some people that a lot of people listen to podcasts on YouTube, even if there are no moving images. So the audio of the podcast will be available on here. But I have a feeling that that's going to appeal to a bunch of people who don't yet listen to the podcast at all because they only listen to audio on YouTube. Whereas I assume most of you listen to the podcast through more traditional podcast platforms. But I'm going to hopefully be doing that in the next month or so. All right. Anything else? I'm happy to answer more, but if you don't have anything, I will head out. All right. Well, take care. Thanks for participating in this experiment, and I appreciate your support a lot. It makes me able to dedicate all the time to the podcast that I need. So, thank you. Take care.